Hello and welcome to MalMakes. Today we're going to be doing a painting based off the video game Journey. For this piece, I'm showing off where the traveler looks at the mountain across the sand dunes. This is the full version. If you're interested in the time-lapse, you can click on the card here. Otherwise, let's get started. I've recently played through Journey and I was so inspired by the entire game. There were many points throughout it that I thought this would make a great painting and I have to paint it for MalMakes. So that's why I decided to do that this week. In fact, if you're interested in watching me on my very first playthrough, you can head over to Steven's channel and watch as we both experience the game for the first time. I'll throw a card up on screen here. Now for the painting, I'm going to be working from a couple screenshots. I'm going to be drawing in some of the major shapes from the screenshots, but I'm going to kind of take some liberties with a few things like the proportion of the traveler and a couple of the locations of the clouds and the dunes. So let's begin drawing. In order to get my sky colors right, I've tried a few things. I started by mixing this yellow-green. I tried mixing with white and I wasn't super happy with it. I tried toning down the intensity with a bit of red-violet. Still wasn't happy with it, and so I tried mixing it with a little bit of blue, and I think that's a good starting point to bring kind of this bluish light green from here. And as I work my way down, I think it needs to get a little orange. So I tried mixing a little bit of orange into it, and I'm much happier with that for the lower part of the sky. So now I'm going to take this, and I'm going to start up top and try and bring this as far down as I can. Maybe move to like a medium light green, and then down in kind of the orangish, warmer green down here. So I've used up as much of that color as I had. When it was all used up, I feathered the bottom with just a little bit of paint that was left on the brush. And now down here what happens is the green kind of warms up and gets a little yellow or a little orange. So I'm going to mix this color up and then I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to move upwards this time. I've mixed up the color that's going to start from the bottom of the sky and work its way up. You can see right here how different it is from this. They're pretty similar still, it's kind of still a light green, but as long as I feather it up and this is feathered down, they're going to meet in the middle and make a nice transition between the two. So I made this color that's down here slightly greener, and you can see it right here. I had to use some more white to lighten it up because when I added the green in, it started to make it dark. So I'm going to start more up here with this. Blend it into this a little bit. Alright, it's still very yellow, so I've messed with it again. And I added a little bit more blue this time. So I'm hoping that it looks, yeah, that looks a lot better. We're going to go with that. For the sky, I had a lot of trouble getting the color right. I thought the first set was too yellow, so I kept making the sky bluer. Eventually, I realized I should have stuck with my original colors, so I did my best to recreate them. I filled in this color and I'm a lot happier with it, so I'm actually going to stick with it. Once it dries, I'm going to start to bring in some fog, or maybe it's just sand in the distance creating atmospheric perspective. There's a bit of a glow around the light on the top of the mountain, so I need to bring that in too. And when we played the game, there was actually a comet leaving the top. And if you've played the game, you know that's kind of special and what the meaning behind that is. So I actually really want to put that in too. But I really need to let this color dry so I don't mess it up again. So I've been trying a few things out with my paints and my mediums. For the bottom of the picture, I need to have this haze in the horizon. And behind the mountain and a little bit on top, there's a glow from where that light is. So I've tried a few things out. Along this way I have zinc white. I tried it with water. I tried it with the drying medium. I tried it with acrylic glazing liquid, and this used to be it on its own. And over here I did the same 4 things, but with kind of a yellow-orange color to see which one I liked best. Now for the haze, I found that the zinc white paint on its own worked really, really well. It doesn't get streaky, it coats really well, but for the glow, I found that if I do the zinc white first, just like I did down here, And then I kind of bring an orange-yellow wash across the top. It'll make it really pop and stand out. So just like I mentioned, the zinc white works best on its own. So I'm just going to kind of lay it down along the bottom and just work it upwards. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create almost a value scale that goes from super, super light sky color into its pure form up higher. And the great thing is, with the zinc white being transparent, I can see my pencil marks behind it yet. So I've been putting this glow in, and I found that at the very, very point where the light originates, it needs to be a lot lighter and pure white. So I used some titanium white just for the very, very center of it. So the sky is starting to turn out really nice, and I'm a lot happier with it now. I think originally it was fine when it was that very first sky color I put down, but on the canvas, to me, it had looked very yellow at the time, so that's why it ended up so blue. But now it's back to a bit more greenish yellow, and I'm a lot happier with it. So the next thing we have in space closest to us is the mountain. So what I've done is I've mixed up an orange. You can kind of see it here. I mixed up an orange, I put a little bit of blue with it to make it a bit more brown, and then I added some black just to darken it up. So I'm going to redraw in the edge of the mountain that I've totally lost by painting so much, and then I'm going to use this to fill it in. So I finished filling in the mountain, and it's very dark, and I did that on purpose. I want to bring more of this, the white, zinc white I had before, in front of the mountain. I need to even up the glow, especially on the right side. It just doesn't seem white enough or glowy enough. And I need to bring some in front of the mountain too. So now that it's dry, I can do that. And just like earlier, I have my zinc white. And I'm just going to make it a little easier to brush with some water, just so it moves a little bit better on the canvas. And I'll start over here. We're just going to bring that all the way across, and then we'll work it up. So I've been painting that mist in, and I'm really unhappy with it. What's happening is the texture of the canvas is coming through, and when I put the wash on, it's settling in those low areas and making it really splotchy, and you're seeing the texture, and I just don't like how it looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remix up the mountain color, repaint the whole thing. I'm going to try and keep it real thick to kind of even out that texture. When it dries, I'm going to try it one more time. So I decided to try something new. I have this molding paste here, and based on how you put it on the canvas, it can either create texture or take it away. I tried to put it as smoothly as possible on top of the mountain in the hopes that it'll cover up the texture of the canvas. Once it dries, I'm going to go back over it with the brown, and then I'm going to try the mist again, and we'll see how it works. So the molding paste has dried, and I mixed up a brown again, so I'm just going to recover this whole mountain with this brown, and I'm leaving it as thick as I can get it. And the good news is the molding paste is going to help with that. Also, I mixed up extra paint so I don't have to water it down any to stretch it just a little bit further. So I'm going to keep it super thick and just fill this in really well, and then I'm going to let that dry. Now that I've filled it in, I'm going to mix some of that color in with some of that zinc white just to lighten it up. And I'm going to go over the bottom just to help me later when I start to bring that mist back in. So the molding paste has dried, the brown has dried, and now I'm going to try this again with the zinc white, just to bring in some of that fog. Now that this looks better, I'm going to go ahead and draw in those clouds that I lost before. There's a bunch along the horizon, we get a couple up here. Then we're going to fill them in solid white. So I filled in with my pencil, and now I'm using titanium white to fill in these clouds, and I picked that over the zinc white this time, because the zinc white is very transparent and the titanium white is not. It's very opaque, so it'll fill in nicely, it'll cover up any inconsistencies, I won't see any color through it, so it's a good base to fill in for these clouds. I finished filling in the clouds that I drew, and I'm very happy with their shape and their direction and how it's looking. I'm not happy with that I can see the brown and the green in my pencil on the very edges. So I'm going to give them another coat of the titanium white. I still have to put a couple clouds in here. They're very hard to see, they're kind of transparent, and I'm going to be using the zinc white for it, but I'm going to have to freehand them because I can see all the pencil here. I know I'm going to see it with that. So I'm using the zinc white to fill in these other clouds, and I'm freehanding them. And they're almost like little ghost clouds. They're really hard to see. They're just kind of barely there, but they give the sky some depth, so it just isn't flat green. And I'm trying not to let the paint sit too heavy in any one area, so they do kind of get faded out and look kind of ghostly. Our next order of business is to work on the top of the mountain. We have the crack that comes down through the middle, and because the mountain is so dark, I'm going to start by putting it in with white. Then I'm going to go and put the glow color in. I filled in the gold, and I'm going to let it dry, but I did outline it a little bit in white to give it more of a glow. I also brought this streak of light up, and I filled in one of these little shooting stars that leave the mountaintop. I'm not going to spoil what they are, but you should play Journey. While those are drying, I'm going to go ahead and start drawing in these dunes for my horizon. They've kind of gotten lost with everything I've done down here, so I'm going to draw those in so I can start to paint them soon. So I finished drawing in the dunes, and now what I'm going to do is I mixed up this kind of a warm glaze, and I'm going to put it over all of this. And I'm just going to try and make it a bit more concentrated here in the center, and it's going to get lighter as it goes outwards. So I filled it in, and it's very orange. I'm not super happy with it, but I'm going to let it dry and see how I feel about it. I also need to repaint these clouds white because now they've turned orange, and I'm going to work a little bit more on this part. So what I've done, I've really added a lot of titanium white here just to really make that part pop. I filled in the clouds with titanium white. They may need another coat, they're still kind of orange. And I filled in the shooting star with some white. I gave it kind of a burst. I used a little bit of zinc white to give it a glow, and then I just made sure that burst was pure white. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to sort of see how I feel about that being orange. I can always add a bit more zinc white across the top if it's too orange. But for now I'm going to go into the dunes. It's time to start filling in these dunes. So I started by making kind of this orange-pink color, and I want to save it for later because as the dunes get closer to us, they get more and more of this color. So I took this and I added a little bit of blue-green to it, And then I made a tint with some white. So these are going to kind of be my base for the far away dunes. And as we get closer, like I said, I'm going to start adding some of this pink orange in. So this is how I'm doing it. I'm taking that peach color kind of as a base, and I'm filling in the whole dune with that peach. After I've done that, depending on how I feel, I may add a little bit of white right along the top edge. And I'm doing that kind of just to make it stand out from its background. And then I'm taking that brownish color I had earlier, and I'm sort of filling it in at the bottom of the dune, right where the next one comes up and covers it a little bit. So I'm kind of just filling it in with some of that, getting all the extra off my brush, getting a little bit more peach back onto the brush, and then I'm just blending it out. Before I go into the last two dunes, I'm going to wash the rest out with another white glaze. And this one's very transparent. I just kind of want to tone the ones in the background down to give some atmospheric perspective. I don't want to do a whole lot. I'm just trying to bring it just down a little bit. So I'm just going to brush this over. So I'm going to let that glaze dry. In the meantime, I'm going to work on these front dunes. And they're a little bit different. They're a lot pinker and a lot brighter. So I'm going to go ahead and start by filling in the highlights with white first, and I'm going to bring some of the pink on top. Just like I did with the rest of the dunes, I've mixed up kind of a darker color, and I'm going to kind of just bring it in a little bit down here. So I'm pretty happy with those dunes, but my glaze is dried back here, so I can go ahead and start to brush this back on, just on the very, very farthest ones. Things have dried a bit. It's time for another white glaze wash across the back. So I finished most of the painting, and I just have our traveler left, and based on how many times I've redone the sky and all the white washes, it's kind of obscured. So I'm going to take my pencil and redraw my pencil lines back in, and then we'll begin painting. For the traveler themselves, I've actually already painted them, and this is a photograph of my other canvas, so I'm using that as a reference to put them here. For our colors, I have cadmium red, and I toned it down with some green, which is over here, to kind of bring the intensity down. I've mixed it in with black to make a shade, and then I have white and black here. As I'm painting, and while the paint's still wet on the canvas, I can use the white and the black to make tints and shades as I go along. So that's kind of going to be how I work. And I'm just going to start filling things in. I'm going to leave the gold for a while yet. I want to make sure the red is set before I move on to that part. Now that I've finished the red, I'm going to paint the border, but instead of painting it gold, I'm going to paint it white first because the cadmium's going to show straight through it and it's not going to be the pure color we want. So I'm going to start by just taking some of the titanium white because it's the most opaque and just going back over all the parts where the border's going to go. So I finished filling in the white and I've mixed up my colors. I'm going to be using this gold right here, and I made this with yellow and the primary red, and I toned it down with this blue violet right here. At first when I made it, it was a bit too orange, but I'm going to save that color because I can use it for shading when I do the gold. The last thing to do on the Traveler is to fill in the pattern on the gold band. I still have the red I used for the cloak, and that's exactly what I'm going to use for this. The scarf design has a slightly different design than the bottom, so I'm going to fill this in first because it's drier, and then I'll move down here. The last major thing to do is to put a shadow under the Traveler. He looks kind of like he's floating, so I'm just going to use kind of this grayish purple I made up and just kind of give him a bit of a shadow down there. And we're done. We have the Traveler looking at the mountain as they begin to cross the dunes. If you're interested in this piece, you can buy a printer poster or bid on this original canvas. There's links in the description. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and I'll see you again here on MalMakes for another video game painting.